When I'm doing my evaluation of kids with OCD and with Tourette now, I am setting the stage for exposure and response prevention treatment for OCD. I'm setting the stage for habit reversal, and it's part of my evaluation. I will say, ooh, that's a very interesting symptom. That one I'm already thinking about how to help you get that one better. I do that as part of my evaluation, so it's integrated, right? Now, one of the things I know about taking care of kids where I'm trying to do psychological treatment and med management at the same time, if I touch that med dose, we don't talk about anything other than medication for the next month. Is that fair? I mean, it's like he was burping a lot yesterday. Well, okay, we did increase the dose the day before. Is this an unusual increase in burping? Has he ever burped like this before? We have to go through this because the supposition is that burping is a side effect of the med increase the day before. So the same thing happens when you're trying to teach kids how to do these behavioral treatments when you're giving meds simultaneously. You actually make behavioral treatments probably less effective. I'm just listing here add-on strategies, adding a second med to get people who have had a partial response better. And these are the strategies that experts have kind of identified as useful. ADHD and tics. The big issue is, do stimulants cause tics to come off in the beginning or increase tic severity? The bottom line is no, N-O. Some will start having tics or increase in tic severity during stimulant treatment, but not permanent. I think there's some data to suggest that. That if you discontinue stimulants in people who have had an increase in tics on stimulants, that you get rid of it, their tics will fall back down. But the natural course and stimulant treatment can appear to cause tics de novo or a permanent increase in tics. So let's say, you have a kid with ADHD, he's 6, you start him on stimulant treatment, 6 months later he starts to have tics. You take him off the stimulant, the tics go away, you put him on the stimulant, he doesn't have any tics, and then 6 months after that his tics are much worse than they were the last time he had tics. You might look at that and say, we're really doing a lot of damage with the stimulant, when it could possibly be that the tics came and went, and they came mild, and the second time they came severe. You don't know. So for any individual family, they have to make the decision to enter into this unknown territory. It's tough to do. But this is really what I teach them. I talk about the TS study group study, 2002, that compared clonidine to methylphenidate or Ritalin, the combination, and a placebo pill. Clonidine worked to improve ADHD. Methylphenidate worked. The combination probably worked a little bit better. Clonidine worked on impulsivity and hyperactivity, and the methylphenidate worked on inattention. But because this was a study that was looking at the safety of stimulants, right, they were trying to collect information on what percentage of kids had worsening tics as a side effect of whatever medicine they were on. So on methylphenidate, 20% of kids had tic worsening. On clonidine alone, 26% of kids had tic worsening. And on placebo, 22% of kids had tic worsening. Cute, isn't it? So what I now tell families, I say, if I touch your child within the next 6 weeks, he's going to have, 25% of kids are going to have tic worsening just by going, Nit. Because that's what the disorder does. It comes and it goes, it gets worse, and it gets worse over an 8-week period in about a quarter of the patients, a fifth to a quarter of the patients, 20, 25%. So now when you hear somebody saying, oh, my kid took this medicine, their tics got worse, I'm saying, well, is that because they were one of these 20 to 25% and it was going to happen anyway? Or is it because the drug actually has a proposed mechanism? So we have a mechanism for stimulants that we believe will set the brain on fire and cause tics to happen because they're very powerful acting central nervous system stimulants. But there are a variety of other medicines that have been associated with making tics worse too, including, are you ready, all the tic-suppressing medicines. So we've had clonidine making them worse, guanfacine making them worse, haloperidol making them worse. And it could just be that there is this fluctuation
And families really need to get comfortable with the idea that once their kid takes that one pill that they set in, this 20 to 25% risk of tic worsening. And it may be they may be getting worse because of the medicine, and they may be getting worse because it's just the time of life. Now, I do know, and this is one of Walkup's primary ADHD and TS practicing principles, I never, and I repeat, never start stimulants in the second or third week of August. Because when they go back to school on September 3rd, 4th, or 5th, their tics are going to go through the roof. And if they're taking a stimulant pill that I just gave them, I'm going to get emergency phone calls. Does that make sense? I never. They start in May or June, and we prove at that point whether they're going to get better or not. Now, sometimes kids have worsening tics as they approach the end of school because it's exciting. Summer vacation. So you have to be very careful about when you start stimulants if you're not going to get caught up in this natural worsening of tics on stimulant medicine because it's the time of the year. I know tics get worse in the fall. They get worse around the winter holidays. They get worse around spring vacation and then summer vacation. So 4 or 5 times a year, I expect my kids to kind of have fluctuations that are all environmentally determined. They're all excitement, stress determined. You really don't want to do a medicine trial like this during one of those times because you'll get yourself really confused. So this is my Inform Containment. This isn't complete, but it does have this thing down in the bottom. If you are willing, you need to understand that your kid's tics may go up and not come down even with drug discontinuation, simply because it was in God or nature's plan for him on that day to have this severity of tics, and it had nothing to do with the medicine. You have to understand that we'll never, ever, ever be able to figure it out whether it was the medicine or whether it was God or nature's plan for you to have this tic severity on that day. You can't sort it. So families who are going to do this have to be comfortable with the doctor who's working with them on that, and then they have to make the decision and then go from there. These are the other disorders that affect kids with Tourette, separation, generalized, and social anxiety. We think of this as kind of a neurotic, suggestible condition where you can kind of talk a kid out of being anxious or pat them on the back and provide reassurance and they'll go away. It doesn't go away unless you use some active treatment. If your kid has an anxiety disorder, separation anxiety, generalized, or social anxiety, if you do nothing, nothing will happen. They don't get better spontaneously. If you use evidence-based treatment, they can have very large benefit. So when I get excited about treating prepubertal kids with anxiety, it's not because I like treating kids, it's because the benefit chance is unbelievable, life-altering. So it's a lot like stimulants, except it's 24/7, 365. It doesn't wane at the end of the day like stimulants do. So if you've kind of caught on to this anxiety thing that I've been talking about today, the reason for that is it's undiagnosed in Tourette, and the treatment response is outstanding. So don't be afraid if you've got a child who's just less than 12 and has an anxiety disorder to do what you need to do to get that youngster anxiety treated. You will be glad you did. Okay, do you know what a power struggle is? Anybody ever have one? How many have them with their spouse, loved one, children? Do you know why power struggles are so powerful in helping children develop maladaptive behaviors? They're based on negative reinforcement. Remember negative reinforcement? That is, when you're faced with a noxious stimuli and you do something to make that noxious stimuli go away, the next time you're presented with that noxious experience, you're going to do that behavior again, right? The other thing about power struggles is it's reciprocal. Both partners play a role. So parents coerce children, children coerce parents, parents out-coerce children, children out-coerce parents. Gets worse and worse. People use stronger and stronger means, escalates to the point where you begin to see kids develop a whole variety of behaviors that are really damaging to them. So what I say is kids win all the power struggles because they have the trump cards. You know, so when the teenager, after years and years of power struggling with their parents, say, if you don't let me do this, I think I'm going to want to die. And the parents say, oh my God, you pulled the I want to die card. You win. At which point that kid says that I want to die card's not a bad deal. Very rarely do you see, in my clinical office, I have, but very rarely do you see a parent say, go for it. We'll all be happier. You don't hear that much. I do, but you don't hear that very much. Most parents fold when they get that kind of threat or a threat to run away. The problem is that parents retaliate at that point by taking them to a therapist, putting them on medicine, hospitalizing them, and getting them locked into a system that may not necessarily have all the wherewithal to stop the power struggles, right? Because the power struggles are a different thing than depression or whatever. It really is an interactional phenomenon. So power struggles essentially teach children all the maladaptive behaviors that drive us crazy. People will ask me, well, why do kids lie? That's a good question. I say, well, do you ask your child questions? Yeah. How else am I supposed to find out? I said, well, if you say, did you do your homework, and your kid says yes, and you say, okay, and he didn't do the homework, you just taught him how to lie. If you say, Billy, did you eat the cookies? And he said, sorry, Mom, I have to be perfectly honest. It's got to be Jimmy. Jimmy ate the cookies. I would never have eaten the cookies. And the parent directs all the attention towards Jimmy, and Jimmy has to go to his room because he ate the cookies, even though Jimmy's protesting that Billy is lying and blaming it on him. And got the picture? All of these strategies. How do kids learn to not listen? She figured it out. It's so good. Parents talk too much. So when I try and invest children in these behavior management programs, I say, listen, if you cooperate with me around the behavior management program, your parents have to shut up. Really? Really? Otherwise, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, they shouldn't have to say anything to you. It should be radio silence. Quiet. Cool. And the parents will say, but I really love talking to my child. And I said, but you don't want to talk to them about underwear and stuff on the floor and flushing the toilet and hanging up their jacket and putting away their lunch. But you don't want to talk to them about that, do you? And they say, no, but the idea that they would just be so independent and taking care of themselves and doing everything without me being there, I just don't know if I could handle it. It's like, oh my God, you poor kid, your parent is never going to let you really grow up and become autonomous because they have a vested need in disrupting your flow. Talking too much makes kids not listen. They go, or I forgot, or I didn't hear you. So there's a whole set of problems. All the noxious, oppositional, talk back, argue, temper tantrum. Temper tantrums are extremely effective. They win arguments. Homework, my favorite. When kids do homework, right, you say, let's get done because you probably have 3 hours of homework. That kid's going to walk to homework like this. He's not going to read the directions. He's going to want a drink of water. He's going to have to go to the bathroom. He's going to start late. He's going to get tired. He's going to have all kinds of other problems that he's going to do. He's going to stall, hoping that those behaviors will get the parent to decrease the expectation around homework. Walk-Up's homework strategy is to give kids less time to do their homework than they need. Because I want them to go fast and become efficient at it. I don't want them to work until it's done because they will take an hour's worth of work and turn it into 3, 4, 5. They will become inefficient, slow procrastinators if you make them work until they're done. They have to work a specified period, then you have to review their work, cut it off, and then send them on their way or get them involved in some other activity. So there's all kinds of stuff around power struggles that sets the Tourette syndrome kid up for those kinds of interactions with his parents. There's a whole group of behaviors that are associated with the lack of supervision, which is essentially knowing where the kid is, knowing what they're doing, knowing who they're with, safety and nurturance in childhood, behavior management of adolescence. Supervision is the parent approach for teenagers. You have to know where they are and what they're doing. You guys know the NIDA commercial, parents are the anti-drug? That's very sound data to suggest that if you want kids to not use alcohol or drugs, you can lecture them till you're blue in the face, which will only teach them to not listen to you, or you can know where they are, who they're with, what they're doing, when they're due out and when they're due home, supervising them. There was a nice study done by the folks at Johns Hopkins where they took kids who had substance abuse problems, and instead of putting them in a 28-day drug abuse program where they learned more drug abusing tricks, they took the parents and trained them how to pay attention and supervise. Kids' drug use went down. The other thing that's cool about supervision is the key parenting strategy that leads to conscience development. Really? Isn't that interesting? So my mom's been dead over 20 years. Whenever I go into a store and pick up something made out of glass, I hear her say, "Johnny, put that down." Okay. She also says things like, if you tell one lie, you're going to have to tell another lie, then you tell another lie. You're going to forget what lies you've been telling, then you're going to get caught in your lie, and then you're going to have to lie your way. Just might as well tell the truth. Just sits back there. And what she did is she just watched me. She knew where I was going. She knew what my motivations were. I was totally transparent. She would look at me and just go, I'd say, okay. We wouldn't even have to talk. She didn't have to ask me questions. She knew what I was about. That's good supervision. When we have moms and dads nowadays that have to ask their children if they have homework, oh my goodness, we are really in a lot of trouble. If you don't know the teachers well enough, the schools well enough, the kind of ebb and flow, kind of what the expectations are, so that you actually ask the 10-year-old how much homework he's got, what he's working on, probably not paying close enough attention. We work with American Indian youth in the Southwest. One of the problems there is identity development. So when I teach identity development for kids is really based on when they look into their parents' eyes, what their parents see in them, think about them, and communicate to them. If the parent is intoxicated, which is one of the problems on the Indian reservation, the kid looks in the parent's eyes and sees a glaze or a haze, they're going to have trouble understanding who they are at that moment and what they're about. If you look into the eyes of your parent and they're looking at you like you're a pathetic child with Tourette's syndrome that is breaking their heart, you have to be careful what you have in your face. If you're a terrific kid who's going to overcome adversity and take on challenges and do well despite a few chinks in the armor, and that kid looks in your eyes and sees that kid's got a real chance. Does that make sense? They want that from you. They look to you for that kind of information about who they are. They oftentimes don't know how they feel. So they look in your eyes, and if you know how they feel and you can give them an explanation for what they're experiencing, they say, all is right with the world. My mom knows who I am, knows what I'm about, knows how I feel, and she does that without even having to talk to me. This is a wonderful place to be. I love that person. That's the experience we want to have with our kids. But there's something about Tourette that throws that off. They become mysterious to us. They become kind of opaque instead of transparent. Because we power struggle with them, we don't necessarily know what motivates them. So we oftentimes, when we're engaging kids with Tourette, we have confusion in our heart and our mind, and we convey that confusion to the kids with Tourette. What I'm trying to say to you is the medical management and all that stuff with Tourette, yeah, it can be kind of confusing, and it's changing, and it now includes maybe a dental orthotic. But in terms of day-to-day management, You're going to be on very firm ground if you are very clear about who you are, what your issues are, what the parents' issues are, who the kid is, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and you focus on the capacities for kids to grow and develop within their normal routine, and that is family factors, academic factors, peer relationships, and leisure time activities. If you have in your mind a vision for who that child is and who they're going to be based on their strengths and weaknesses in those 4 domains, when they look in your eyes, they will look in your eyes, they'll see themselves, they will develop a positive identity. Does that make sense? We communicate that all here, never here. When we overpraise, have you ever been overpraised? I had a boss who loved to overpraise me. The only time he would overpraise me was when he wanted me to do something. I could always tell it was coming. Walk up, you are just terrific. I said, okay, I got it. What do you want me to do now? So overpraise, while we think about praise as an important thing, non-strategic praise is not. It kind of tells the kid that we're working them, that we're trying to motivate them, that we're trying to do something to them that isn't necessarily authentic in the moment. We're trying to maybe even manipulate them through the use of praise. Anybody who feels that way about that experience doesn't feel praised, right? It's not a good experience if you've been overpraised. So those kinds of quality interactional experiences are really, really important, and I include them under supervision. This is what being attuned to your kid is all about. I ask families when they come in, is your kid transparent to you or opaque? And when they say he's opaque, we have no clue about who he is or what he's about, I go, we've got a lot of work to do, but the solution is going to be to teach you how to pay attention and supervise so that you study your child and learn about their motivations, their rhyme, their reason, so that when they look in your eyes, you can say, I get you, I know who you are, I know what you're about, I'm not confused by you. You can count on me to kind of be there with you because I get you. When you talk to adolescents who have not been well supervised, they say, my parents are clueless. They don't get me. They've never understood me. Now they want me to do this. They want me to do that. They have never really been tuned into me. They don't get me. That, for me, is a supervision issue. That's a parent that's kind of been distracted by something and hasn't really been able to be there for their kid. So why is all this so troublesome? Well, poor parental discipline, power struggles, and poor monitoring leads to behavior problems in early childhood. When those kids go to school, they have academic problems, and they get rejected by normal peers. This kid who has 1,000 or 1,500 power struggles a year with his parents, when he goes to school and the teacher says, would you please sit down, Billy, what's he going to say? So the cool thing that happens at school is the teacher goes, oh my gosh, the principal promised me that I only had 4 kids like this in my class this year. I'm now counting 5, and I have questions about another one. I may be up to 6. You know that they do this. They dose them per classroom. And the really good teachers get a little bit more, but they know that they'll lose those good teachers if they unload on them completely. And then the other thing that happens is when that kid says no to the teacher, the other kids go, whoa, he's too hot to handle. So they get rejected by normal peers. Families will come to me and say, should I get him a tutor? I said, well, what are his academic problems based on? Well, he's got a pretty normal neuropsychological profile. He's an average kid. And I said, well, what about his capacity to follow directions and to sit down and to follow through? And, oh, he's terrible at that. I said, well, then what we need to do is parent behavior management training so that you can get his behavior under control at home, and then that'll generalize to school, and we won't need a tutor. How about a social skills group? So he's not rejected by normal peers. Well, what is it about? Why is he rejected? Well, he can't share. He's bossy. He likes to have his way all the time. I said, well, geez, those are behavior management issues that need to be solved at home. You could put him in a social skills group, but you're not going to have much success there because that's 1 hour a week. If we work on these things at home, it's 24/7, 365. We can get your youngster on track, and once he's on track at home, we can take it into the school environment. If you don't do anything at this point, there's negative peer group. This is delinquent peers. These are kids who get involved with criminal activity. But this is the alienated and disaffected group down here. These are the kids who really believe their parents are completely clueless, and their parents probably are completely clueless. So with those kids, I go back to parental monitoring and discipline and early behavior problems, same thing here. And I tend to think about these kinds of end-stage problems that we see commonly in kids who have misbehavior as really emanating from kind of primary failures in home discipline and in home supervision. So what we do, this is really the kind of parent side, and this is the kid side. And when I was in training, I was told that depressed parents raise kids who have behavior problems, or poor parents have kids who have behavior problems. And I said, well, I've seen a lot of poor parents whose kids are terrific. So what's going on there? And they said, this model kind of helps explain that. Is if you're poor and you have to work 2 jobs and you can't supervise, and when you come home you're irritable and cranky and you get into a lot of power struggles, your kid's going to have behavior problems. Does that make sense? If you and your spouse don't agree on parenting and you're arguing all the time and effectively neither of you functions as an adequate parent, that's going to impact your ability to parent and your kid's outcome. Does that make sense? If grandma was the primary caretaker and grandma passes on and the parent is left with 2 jobs and no primary caretaker, that parent's probably not going to be an effective parent moving forward. See how that works? So it's this parenting thing that sits right in the middle between all of the problems that we see within the parent generation and the kid generation. This little line here is really about kid factors. So a kid with ADHD is much more difficult to parent. That kid with ADHD is going to have a higher percentage of power struggles on a day-to-day basis and is going to more quickly develop maladaptive behaviors because he's caught in those power struggles with his parents. Does that make sense? More power struggles you have, the more you train kids to misbehave or use maladaptive strategies. Parents who are ineffective with their children, it adds to their stress burden, breaks them down, and makes it more difficult for them to parent. And for those of you who you and your spouse have different disagreements about parenting, anybody here like that? Oh, you know what? Once you have a child with Tourette, whatever your inclination is as a parent, you just go to the complete extreme. So I've had parents sit in my office say, but he's so sweet and he's such a loving child. If you just loved him more, he'd be fine. Yeah, but he misbehaves and he's got an attitude, and if we could just discipline him more, he'd be better. Oh, but if we just loved him more, wouldn't it be easier to kind of just do it with love? It's like, man, but I think he needs some discipline. Well, I don't like how you discipline. Well, I think sometimes when you're loving him, you're indulging him. Well, I think when you're disciplined, you're actually mean and hurtful like you are to me sometimes. Got the picture? So you have a kid like this that you have power struggles with, and all of a sudden that power struggle gets contagious among the parents, and then they get polarized. My best marital therapy is parent behavior management training. If I can get mom to agree with me and dad to agree with me, kids get better. But if that one agrees with me and that one agrees with me, they probably are agreeing with each other. So anyway, this is the model. So I teach parenting for many of the problems that I see with kids with Tourette. So here's some books. I talked to somebody about 1, 2, 3 Magic. There are 2 kinds of parenting books. There are books that I call kind of hard hat parenting books, discipline, rigor, behavior, and then there are empathy, warm, caring, those kinds of books. How to make your son an empathic boy, that kind of book. Hard-headed and soft-hearted kind of parenting books. For kids who are at risk for behavior problems, I kind of like the hard-headed ones, a little bit more discipline focus. And the reason for that is if a kid is well-disciplined, he becomes more lovable. People in the Tourette world love this book. People relate to it because Ross essentially creates an idea, and I like Ross, and it's a good parenting book, but he creates the idea that these kids are kind of broken and that you've got to find your way to kind of manage that behavior. What I'm trying to teach you is that behavior that you're trying to manage has causal forces, and that those forces are interactionally based. Now, the kid who's got neuropsychiatric stuff or neurodevelopmental stuff, they're going to have power struggles more frequently and at higher risk to develop at a faster rate and more severe disruptive behaviors than the kids who don't. because the kids who don't are easier to manage. You can make a million mistakes with them. They'll still figure out a way to raise themselves. The kinds of kids we're talking about today, ADHD, Tourette, anxious kids, they don't raise themselves very well, and they will power struggle with you around routine stuff, and they will develop maladaptive behaviors more quickly. Ross doesn't think, at least by my reading of this book, doesn't think that it's important for you to understand how those behaviors develop, whereas I think understanding that power struggles are really the cause of this disruptive behavior is absolutely critical for figuring out solutions. What he talks about is how to diffuse power struggles, right? How to kind of avoid them. And one of the things that I see in avoidance of power struggles is actually a component of the power struggle, which is to say that once the kid develops a maladaptive behavior that's big enough, you just kind of go, okay. You are essentially, by letting that maladaptive behavior dictate your expectations in that situation, you are actually feeding that maladaptive behavior. Does that make sense? But that's what they do. He wants you to put stuff in a bucket, which works just fine. He also teaches collaborative problem solving and other kinds of stuff, but he really doesn't talk about how power struggles are the engine of the development of maladaptive behaviors. And I think that's important part of parent training because it sets into what do you want to do in terms of your daily behavior management program at home. Every one of these are based on sound behavioral principles. All right, so CBIT lifestyle, remember we talked about that? So positive home environment avoids unintentional reinforcement of maladaptive behaviors. It is proactive in tone. Expectations are embedded in space and time. And it'll include, are you ready? You're going to find this out today, the secret of life. Is it too much yet? Basic assumptions. Children want to please their parents. Parents want to do a good job. Goal-directed behavior problems are learned. They don't come into the world learning how to lying. They learn how to lie over time because it works. They learn to use anger and their temper because it works. It's an effective strategy for managing difficult interactions. Because it's learned, you can reverse behavior problems, and parents can develop family leadership. I got to believe this or I'd go out of business. So everybody can be helped. One of my favorites, children never seem to do what their parents tell them to do, but never fail to imitate how their parents behave. So you can talk all you want, but they're watching what you do on a day-to-day basis. And if you create a living environment for them without words that has all of the positive benefits of growth and development, it decreases power struggle and enhances your supervision so that you know them and they're crystal clear, they will imitate that for the rest of their life. You don't have to explain it to them. You just do it, they'll feel it. When you've worked in a solid educational setting or when you've worked in a good organization and then you've worked in a bad educational setting or a bad organization, you can feel the difference. Nobody has to tell you whether it's good or bad or not. You can just tell by the morale of the people involved in the place, how it's functioning, how decisions are getting made, who gets rewarded, who doesn't get rewarded. You can feel it just by being in it, and kids can feel that, and they like the feeling of a solid, well-run organization. Behavior principles work, no guarantee, but there are a few other choices. So I have a lot of families that say, well, you know, we've tried behavior modification, and I say, well, okay. It didn't work for us. I said, well, what are you going to do? If you're not going to use the laws of human interaction to make decisions about how you're going to live, what are you going to do? I don't know. Algae? I've heard a lot about green algae, blue algae, and that's what happens. They turn the tennis racket around and they use the handle to hit the tennis ball. Parents have to have a plan. Most parents nowadays, modern parents, are encouraged to be reactive. Follow their hunger, follow their sleep patterns, follow their toilet pattern, follow their learning strengths, follow this, follow that. And so what happens is we are followers of our children instead of leaders of our children. Got to have a plan. Oh, this is a good one. Mom, Dad, and the marriage are okay. They all laugh. This is just my out, because when the families come in, I don't ask them too much about how their marriage is. Sometimes I can tell. But if they're not really working well together, it's going to be very difficult to develop a good behavior management plan. And then the other part, this is really important. I see parents who have kids who are 25, 28, and when you go back over the history, you see spots where they probably could have done something that might have deflected the kid. And so I tell families that this is something that they have to do at some point in time, and they might as well do it now, because when their kid's 28 or 29, they want to be able to go to sleep at night and say that they were able to do everything they needed to do, including kind of set up their home life in such a way as to make everything possible that could be possible. So how do we learn to parent? From your parents? Oh my goodness. From your own experience? From friends and other relatives? From a book? Classes? I say parenting is a lot like learning how to play a musical instrument or a sport. You can read about it. You can take a group lesson. You can take a private lesson. Some people need private lessons. Some people can learn about it from a group or a book. And I have some families who could have a family session every week and they'd still never learn it. There's something fundamental about how they organize the world that it doesn't allow them to get into a kind of a discipline mode around running their home. So what do we teach? We spend a lot of time teaching about what to expect in development, developmental milestones. We teach communication skills like active listening. We teach anger management. I've been giving advice to parents for years and years and years. Most parents are tone deaf to that. We very rarely teach behavior management, even though the evidence base for behavior management is probably one of the strongest evidence bases in all of mental health. We know the principles of effective parenting. So how do we do it? We do the full assessment. You look at the specific conditions. You get them all tuned up with all that stuff. You identify the parent and behavior issues, power struggles, and poor supervision, and you begin to put together a plan. It's all about building new skills. Families will come to me and say, well, I think we need your help because he punched a hole in the sheetrock on the weekend. What should we do? And I said, get some plaster. Because that's a behavior that is end stage. That is an end stage power struggle behavior. This is the kid who, in that power struggle, got so angry that he may have looked threatening at the parent and then moved away to do something destructive. That kind of display of aggression and force makes that parent think twice about that interaction next time. That is end stage. That is prevented. There's nothing you can do in the minute to stop that. You have to reset the system to get that kid and family back on track. So I don't focus on those big problems. I think about getting back to parenting fundamentals. I teach behavioral principles to parents. Really, it's the difference between what I'm doing and what Ross Greene does. We're all working on the same theoretical model, but I teach why the behavior problems develop and then think about solutions that undo that. He talks more about strategies to manage from the point of a problem forward. And then the other important thing about good behavior management is that once a kid develops a powerful living skill, they will generalize that skill across situations. Do you remember the first time your kid told you a joke and you laughed? What happened? How many months did he keep telling that joke? Right? Once a kid learns a skill that allows them to feel comfortable and successful in their own living, they will repeat that skill in every environment. So the key thing around behavior management is teaching those kinds of skills to kids so that not only do they learn them here, but they begin to try them there and there and there and there, and they begin to accumulate successes because they're using living, coping, adaptation, decision-making strategies that have built within them success and generalizability across situations. What's the goal of a behavior program? Like tennis lessons or music lessons, the whole goal is to feel what it feels like. So when I tell parents to be consistent or set firm limits or ignore that behavior, they go. But they have no idea what it means to ignore a behavior or to set a firm limit or to be clear about what their expectations are. So what I do is I give them lessons or exercises to do So if they do those, they will say, I was very firm in that situation. I was very clear about what my expectation was. I didn't have to yell. I was much more consistent over those 3 or 4 days when I was working that system. And so families will come back to me and label their behavior as firmer, more consistent, more strategic in how they work by giving them tasks to do. Decrease verbal interactions. This Jerry Patterson guy looked at maladaptive families. 50 to 60 times per hour they talk. Kids who are doing well, they talk to their families 3 to 5 times an hour. Hurry up, get up, you got to get up, got to get out of the bathroom before your dad. Your dad's going to need to take a shower. Pick up hang up your towel, flush the toilet, put the cap back on the toothpaste. Come on, let's go. Hurry up, you're going to be late. What do you want for breakfast? Don't wear that T-shirt. Come and get your laundry. That teaches children how not to listen. All behavior programs have some kind of structure. All have a structure to them. Every one of them. Any one of those books will talk about a structured way of living. Some will add specific rewards. I'm not a big fan of rewards because rewards are inflationary. If he wants $1 for his homework tonight, in a month he's going to want $5 for his homework. I'm not a big fan of punishments because punishments actually play into the power struggle. I used to do timeout until the one family came back and said, we did 20 timeouts yesterday, and it seems like we're going to be using even more today. They had incorporated a good parenting strategy into their power struggles. So that now what they were doing is power struggling. And they said, well, should we use a basket hold when he won't sit down? And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're now going to include a wrestling match in daily discipline. Because once you're in that power struggle mode, even good parenting tactics can get caught up within the power struggle. Relapse prevention. Parenting is like dieting and exercise. Everybody can do it for about 6 weeks. No, it's actually, when you see effective parents, it looks smooth as silk. Their kids just kind of hop to and they bounce around and you're like, how the heck did they get... That was just amazing. I didn't even see the mother do anything, and that kid this is really unbelievable. They make parenting look easy. It's like Tiger Woods makes it look easy, or at least used to. Yo-Yo Ma makes it look easy, right? Maynard Ferguson on the trumpet, he makes it look easy. When people are highly skilled at what it is they're doing, it looks simple. What we see with families that are struggling is they are working so hard at parenting. They double, triple, quadruple think themselves. They talk through it. They're doing one thing this way and then another thing that way and then another thing this way. They look completely confused. Their kids' heads are spinning because they haven't tapped into the kind of fundamentals of parenting. Every child is a snowflake. They're all wonderful, specific, and unique human beings who, when you get right down to it, all have the same morning routine if they go to school. So no matter what country or culture you were to look at, getting up, getting dressed, getting ready, and going to school probably looks universal everywhere in the world. And there are probably better ways for that morning routine to be structured and less effective ways. So what we try to teach parents is optimal ways to structure the morning routine so that you have fewer power struggles and you can supervise effectively and provide adequate rewards. But this is most kids' daily routine during the school year. After school is a little bit more complicated time because kids have lessons and doctor's visits and all kinds of stuff. So I don't try and structure that early on. I spend a lot of time on the morning routine. I spend a fair amount of time on the evening routine second and then get to this after school. By the time families have learned how to do this one and trained their child around that, and they've trained their child around this, the child almost trains himself for the after school routine. They've embedded that structure within them, and so they generalize to the after school routine. So I never start with the after school routine. I always start with the morning. So I ask parents to create a current and ideal schedule on a legal pad. And I ask them to focus on a specific behavior. I've sent families away with a homework assignment. They come back in a week, and on an envelope, it's get up, eat, go to school. That's the morning routine? Yeah, that's the morning routine. Get up, eat, and go to school. I said, do they go to school in their pajamas? Because there's no point in here about taking off pajamas and putting on clothes. Oh, yeah, they do that. I said, well, where is that in the morning to him? Where does that get done? And what about peeing? Does he pee in the morning? Oh, yeah, he does that in there. I need you to be specific about where you want that. I've had kids who get a ride to school, and they force their parents to stop because they forget to pee at home, and then they've had breakfast and they have to pee in the car, so they have to stop at a gas station on the way to school. Never happen. Should never happen. Focus on specific behaviors in real detail. Establish a logical sequence. Establish task reward sequences throughout the day. Ooh, that's the secret of life right there. And then establish monitoring or supervision times for parents. So what does it look like? Well, look at this daily routine. This is a real daily routine. When was the first power struggle? There's a right answer and there's a trick right answer. First power struggle happened when? From what to what?
From TV and Nintendo.
Absolutely, right there. This is a family that yelled, screamed, punished, early bedtimes, took away privileges, you name it, to get this kid out the door and dressed in time. And it took about 2 days of this routine to get him on track. See the difference? So what I'm trying to do with this morning routine is I'm trying to get all the work-related activities out of the way, done in an efficient sequence, so that the kid can get down to the most gratifying and rewarding part of his morning as fast as he possibly can. And the issue there is that this is the benchmark, being in the kitchen on time. So the kid comes in the kitchen, you look in their eye, you look at the clock on the microwave or the stove, it says 7:29, you look back at him and you go, oh, my baby. And that kid's like, let's eat, let's go, because I got to get down here. Come on, Mom. They begin to move quickly through the morning routine just by reorganizing its structure. Does that make sense? They race to get to the reward because you set that out in front of them. I have families who say, well, I don't like having my child watch television. I said, well, okay, so read them a story. I've had a dad and a son, read the sports pages together, when the Orioles are playing or the Nationals are playing. They do, I don't care. I've had the mom comb hair, put the hair up in a braid or do something beautiful with. That's the reward for getting it done here. So when I talk about the secret of life, I am talking about the linkage between task, supervision of that outcome, and providing access to a reward trains children to motivate themselves going forward into the future. It is absolutely key. We know that if we pay people and then ask them to do stuff, what happens? Doesn't work. This sets up a powerful directional force in the morning that you don't even have to motivate kids to do because they want to get down here to the bottom line. Does that make sense? If they're in the kitchen on time, then the parents don't fret. If this is a kid who has to be out the door at 8 o'clock, and if the in the kitchen time is 7:55, and you're not sure he's actually going to make it or not at 7:55, then the anxiety rises, then the verbal interactions start, then the power struggles begin, and you can guarantee that the kid at that point will be late. So you have to set a benchmark time that is early enough for them to be in the kitchen so that the parent stays chilled and can keep their emotions under control in the morning routine. The kids get so time-bound and used to being monitored and supervised around compliance with the time boundaries that when this time boundary comes up, after they've mastered this whole process, they actually transition better. That's what I talk about with the generalization of behavior. Most problems can be solved with a daily routine. If this kid's doing what they're supposed to be doing, they will not be doing what they're not supposed to be doing. I have some teenagers who get up at 7:27 and are still in the kitchen at 7:29, right? Because sleep becomes so important to them. That's why this is a false boundary. I've had families that say, well, He's not in the kitchen by 7:30, so we have to get him up at 6:45, 6:30, 6:15, 6 o'clock. And what I say to them is the earlier you get them up, it just guarantees you're going to have a longer power struggle because the only thing that matters is 7:29. The kid knows that it's only going to take him 15 minutes to get ready to go, but if you give him 2 hours to do that, he is going to stall, procrastinate, fight. Children learn how to sleep at their parents. Wake up. Okay. Wake up. Okay. I'm awake. Wake up. In a minute. I'm still tired. They learn to not hear their parents when they wake up in the morning. Teenagers, anybody? There you go. They become expert at sleeping through whatever you do. I've had parents with the spray bottles. Both parents have to develop the routine. Now, even though moms are, in most families, are responsible for implementing the routine, the dads have a very important role in the routine because if the dads say something like, they'll never work, it just dashes the hope. So I have to grab Dad by the lapel and pull him into this thing and make sure that he's part of the development of the plan. Got to make sure the kid can do all the tasks. And then you train the child to do tasks as a block of behavior. I've now become an expert at analyzing bad behavior plans. There are good behavior plans and there are behavior plans that really stink. The behavior plans that would reward him for waking up, going to the bathroom, getting dressed, cleaning the room, self-assess, being in the kitchen on time. I've seen those kinds of behavior plans. This is what the parents are doing in the morning. They're chasing the kid around, giving him tokens. The kid's like getting distracted, off task, and importantly, the kid isn't learning the sequence. If you think about what we do when we solve problems, we take a new situation, we dig deep into our problem solving, we find a problem solving scaffold, which usually has some kind of assess the problem, think it through, consider alternatives. All of that kind of stuff is a scaffold that we have inside of us. This is a scaffold of coping. And it works so well if the sequence is smooth and efficient and gets it done to a level of high competence that the kids will incorporate this scaffold and begin to use that scaffold as the beginning of their adaptation and coping strategy for the rest of their life. Rehearsals to work out the bugs. These rehearsals can be so much fun. So I've trained teenagers to wake up fast. Lay down, pretend you're asleep. Okay, ready, set, go. Psht. Okay, they sit up, turn your feet around, sit up. So you just teach them how to do it. You go through what the steps are, and it seems silly, but you can even reward teenagers for participating in a waking up routine. You got to monitor the performance, and you provide progress reports. I'm a big fan of family meetings on Wednesday or Thursday night to both review the previous week's behavior and to plan the weekend activities. The last thing parents like to do is, Saturday morning know that they have to give a ride to a kid to a baseball game at 1 o'clock when they weren't planning to do that. I like those discussions to happen Wednesday night or Thursday night so that kids begin to plan ahead, think, and problem solve, and also review the previous week's behavior in terms of getting in the kitchen on time and all that sort of stuff. You have to expect to see generalization. If you don't see generalization, you may not be using kind of generalizable skills, powerful skills that work cross situations. When the parents get the hang of it, you can work on other time periods that are more difficult to structure. So I do evening next after you've nailed the morning routine and then the after school. Focus on task reward sequences. There are about 8 task reward sequences throughout an average kid's day. There's 2 to 3 in the morning, 2 to 3 after school, and 2 or 3 after dinner. And if you figure out what those are, they're essentially how the world works. You go to school, work for a couple hours, have recess, work for a couple hours, have lunch, work for a couple hours, have art or music. I get a cup of coffee, I work for 2 hours, I get another cup of coffee, I work for 2 hours, I have lunch, work for another couple hours, and then I go around and hang out with my staff and small talk and do all kinds of rewarding stuff at the end of the day with our team. That's how the days are built. And so if you set up that kind of work, supervise, reward, work, supervise, reward, as a sequence of activities throughout the day, you will create that experience of you have expectations, they're embedded in space and time, Your parents supervise and pay attention to you when you complete. They pat you on the back, and they provide access to a gratification. It is smooth and easy. Do weekends last? Weekends are really hard. They have huge amounts of free time in them. When I've seen the daily routine for a kid on a Saturday, it's like he's done with his homework. Oh, by the way, homework is Saturday morning, not Sunday night. Ooh. Sunday night homework is the dreaded. Nobody wants to do it. Anyway, you got 6 hours, noon to 6 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon to fill with time. Really hard to do. So I ask parents to make a leisure activity list, where they put down the activity and then they put the amount of time that the kid can do it. And so when they're beginning to plan a 12 to 6 o'clock block, they don't put in coloring. There's no kid who's going to color for 6 hours. Come on, you got to have probably 30 activities for a 6 or 7-year-old to get them from noon to 6. You could do some outdoor activity or something like that. That might be an hour, hour and a half, but sometimes they get bored. And what do you do if it rains? You have to have a plan in place if you're going to kind of do this. And the reason why the leisure activity list is really good is you want Billy to, at some point, see that he's got a block of free time in front of him and say, I can do this now. So that he begins to entertain himself instead of saying, Mom, I'm bored. Dad, I'm bored. Got what I'm saying? We want Billy to internalize the leisure list so that he comes up with activities that he knows he's going to enjoy, and he begins to build his own leisure time activities. Monitoring systems, I use a calendar, and this is what the calendar looks like. I put those 9 little things over there in a calendar where they have the block. When I look at one of these behavior routines, I interpret it. It's like reading tea leaves. And this is a kid who's in the kitchen really effectively for that week. But look at this. 3 out of 5 days, he didn't get the teeth brushing thing right. You could yell, scream, argue, harass. Do you know what the problem was? He was a kid with ADHD, and he had to go back upstairs to the bathroom to brush his teeth. He got lost. So what we did is we brought the toothbrush and the toothpaste down to the powder room in the first floor, and it was more readily supervised. He became an ace at brushing his teeth because we changed the structure and the environment to make him successful at the activity, given his limitations. This is a behavior, out the door on time, out the door on time, out the door on time. That was all pretty good. What's this one? This is some evening activity. I don't know exactly what this is. Look at this. Really good, really, really good, really good. Uh-oh. That's a problem, right? The reason that's a problem is because they were successful for a while, and now all of a sudden they're unsuccessful. This, for me, is a behavior that's tied to daylight savings time or the school year, where all of a sudden the schedule shifts and kids get out of phase, either with their sleep behaviors or their other routines, and you actually have to rewrite or redo the routine to get them established in the alternative routine around daylight savings time or around school. What do you do with this behavior? Completely ignore it. This is how I teach ignoring. I teach ignoring it. Those are the behaviors that happen once in a blue moon. What I'm trying to do with this is trying to help people pick up what's an ignorable behavior and what's a behavior that you have to think through and problem solve around. What else is up here? Oh, these little boxes. This is what I do for temper tantrums. So how do you get people to lose weight? Do a couple of things. You ask them to eat 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. And then the other thing you'd ask them to do is write everything down. As soon as they have to write it down, they stop eating it. So what I do with kids who have temper tantrums is I ask the parents to keep a log book of when the temper tantrums are. So there's 1 there, none, 2 there, 1 there, 1 there. Then after they've set a baseline for the frequency of temper tantrums, which in this kid is about 2 times a week, I ask them to sit down with the child and kind of prepare a plan for the following week, which would essentially be, listen, you had 1 day with 2 temper tantrums. Most days you just have 1. I think I'm okay with you having 2 temper tantrums a week, maximum of 1 a day. Do you think we can work on that? Kids are like, what are you talking about? No. Look at this is data. You got 1 there, 2 here, 1 here, 1 here. I think most of these happen after school. This was a particularly bad day. So I'll remind you that after school is kind of a tough time, but we're going to try and get to just 2 temper tantrums a week this week. Sure, whatever makes you happy, Mom. So we set it up, right? So what do kids do when you set the expectation for 2 temper tantrums a week? They come in under. They might have 1 or 0. Then my favorite thing, my most favorite intervention, then I'll quit, is it's Friday and you were supposed to go to some place and be outside. It was going to be wonderful, but it's raining, right? And he hasn't had any temper tantrums all week. And so you come up to him and you say, oh, my God, we were supposed to do the most thrilling activity of your life tonight. But it's raining and we just can't do it. And as I look at the calendar here, it looks to me like you haven't had a temper tantrum all week. And if you were ever going to have a really good reason to have one, now's the time. There's no kid who can temper tantrum under those circumstances. And once you've nailed it with that intervention, you're all done with temper tantrum. Okay, so this parenting stuff, I usually do this in a 2-day workshop. So there's a lot of detail in here, but if you get task reward, if you get sequencing, start with the morning routine, race kids to the finish, those kinds of strategies all help. You can do this on your own, problem solve on your own. It can be incredibly helpful to kind of set up a lifestyle for a youngster that's consistent with reduced tic severity and especially reduced behavior problems over time. Most parents don't plan, so they get caught off guard, and they don't really know what to expect. If you have a plan and you lead that plan, kids will follow.